All right, we're looking at chapter 16, therapy and treatment. So about 19% and 13% of adolescents will experience mental illness in a given year. And the thing that we're seeing is that not all people are going to seek therapy. Reality is some of us are going to talk to professionals and some of us are going to talk to friends and family. And it's not wrong to talk with them, but sometimes we need professional help. So about 1/3 to half of US adolescents are going to receive treatment for that behavior disorder that they have. All right, in the beginning, and we talked about this in chapter 1, really throughout the whole semester, we've talked about all of this. But we used to think that mental illness was some sort of like demonic possession, witchcraft, or something. And so we would try to use supernatural forces to get these out of these individuals so that they could have their sanity back. And so they would do exorcisms where prayers were said over and they try to get them out, or the trephinning where they would put a hole in their skull and try to release that spirit out of there. Typically, people died from this because you were putting a hole in their skull. And then they could be executed or even imprisoned because they thought that they were under these spells or witchcraft or demonic possession. In the 18th century, they were institutionalized in these asylums, and they were not really nice facilities. Okay, so they were ostracized from society. They weren't treated. They were a problem to society. And so instead of helping it and fixing them, they created these spaces for them to just kind of be locked up in rather than actually treated. They were usually windowless. They were chained to beds. They didn't have a lot of contact with caregivers. Here's a picture of what Hoyos says is the madhouse. And so it just portrays some of these individuals that were suffering with psychological disorders. And then later they argued that you really had to have more humane treatment and that this was unacceptable. So they suggested maybe unchain them, talk to these individuals, letting them realize they're still people that were there. And they really benefited the patients from this, and many were able to leave. Then you have Dorothea Dix, which she was way ahead of her time. She was an advocate for these individuals. And she said that you couldn't take care of these people like this, that they were still people. And so she really investigated the state care for those that were mentally ill and poor and found that they were unregulated and underfunded. And so she really put a voice out there for these individuals who were struggling and living in these situations. And so her help was really fundamental in getting better treatment. The asylums, they were usually filthy. Again, there wasn't a lot of treatment that happened. And this went on for decades. Some treatments that they would have would be trying to submerge them in a cold bath for a long time, or even electroshock treatment. And so they would stimulate you and create a grand mal seizure. Now, we do this today, but it's much more humane than it was then. But they would, if somebody was gay, a gay man or a lesbian, they would shock you to try to shock out that gay or the lesbian within you. And these were very common until the 20th century. So and it is sad. This talks about how in London people would go for fun, like on your night out to go see a movie or whatever. You would go to the asylum to go see what was going on. In the 50s, we started antipsychotic medication, and that was really helpful to get rid of the psychosis. So that was a common diagnosis, and so they could help get rid of hallucinations, delusions, help them come back to reality. And then in 1975, we had kind of MHMR, that community where it was federally funded. We could help people who needed these mental health centers and services, and we started to get rid of that deinstitutionalization. So they were closing those big asylums and providing places where people could stay, that they could actually get treatment. And now the system is better, but not, again, still probably not as good as it should be. Again, underfunded, the staff is untrained, and a lot of people, I think the statistic last I looked was 86% of individuals who are homeless have a mental disorder. So we still are not doing right by individuals who are suffering from mental health. It's much better than it has been, but it obviously could still improve quite a bit. So we have to find ways to help them, especially those that are living on the street who've not been able to function in society. We need to help them get the help they need so that they can return to society and have their lives back. So you have different types of treatment. You can have involuntary treatment and you can have voluntary treatment. So involuntary is exactly what it sounds like. You didn't want it, but you have no choice. These can sometimes be court ordered. Voluntary is you walk in saying, I know I need help. Let me get this treatment that will help everything out. So here's just a bunch of lists of different types of treatment and this is just a brief list. There's so many ways that we can treat people, and you may know, but not everybody is the right fit for their therapist or psychologist. So it's not just a one size fits all. You go in and you get the help you need and then you walk out. You may have to go through a couple of different psychologists or therapists for you to find one that works well with you. You may need to try different types of treatment. It's really beautiful that there's more than one option. Psychoanalysis was developed by Sigmund Freud, and he really believed that this would help us to get those repressed feelings back out. And so he would use free association, where he would say something and you would say what comes to mind. And he really believed that he could try to unblock what you weren't talking about. And so if you were unable to accept those things that he was saying, that you were blocking it and there was the resistance, and we needed to kind of get into that to figure out what the issue was. And then you had dream analysis. That's where he would help you to be able to interpret the underlying meaning of your dreams. And then transference, where the patient transfers all their positive or negative emotions with their relationships to the psychoanalyst. And so today we do use this. It's less popular than when Freud had it, but it is helpful. Lots of looking into the unconscious, those childhood conflicts, and a lot of that. And you have to get your medical degree, and then I'm not sure if you have to then specialize in psychiatry and then get it, but I do know you have to be a medical personnel before you can even become psychoanalytic. And so Freud was very famous for this couch, and he would have you lay down. He was kind of the first one that had you lay down and talk about what was going on. Most psychotherapists don't do that today, but he wanted you just to get comfortable so that he could really tap into that unconscious and you could work through what the issues were. Play therapy, very popular. We have different techniques. This is mostly used for children because they can't always express how they're feeling. So if you can let them play, they can kind of work through what's going on. And so they may be, I had one kid who would take his baby, he had a baby doll, and he would get like an extension cord, and he would spank that baby and hit that baby over and over and over with the extension cord. And that was because he was being hit at home at his other parents' house. And so he didn't know how to say it and he didn't know what to do, but he could express what was happening. And his mother wanted to stop him, but the therapy said, no, you have to let him express how he feels. Okay. And he's not being harmful to the child because he's malicious. He's been treated that way. And so he's trying to work through all of that. So you can do different things where you have directive play, where the therapist is kind of guiding it, or non-directive play where the child works through their own struggles and you can kind of see what they're going on with. And then sand play, that just kind of helps to calm them down, get to their inner state, and then they can interact with toys and then look at what's going on with them. They just, when they don't feel like, they can't express themselves as well. And when they don't feel like they're put on display and they think they're just playing, you'll learn a lot more about them. Behavior therapy is that conditioning like we looked at with chapter 6 and Skinner, Watson, all of that, where we can condition you to get what we want from you, or then counter condition you to remove that stimulus, and we can get rid of some adverse conditioning. Or exposure therapy. So maybe you were fearful of spiders, we can expose you to it by flooding or by not successive approximations, but we can slowly show you them, and then you can overcome your fear. So there's lots of different things that you can do with this, and we see a lot of great therapy coming out of this, especially being able to do with telehealth kind of stuff, because you can not telehealth, but you can use digitally rather than having to look at a tarantula. You can interact digitally with one, like the virtual reality, and that can help you to overcome some of your fears. So this just looks at it. You scared of rabbits, we're conditioned to look at the cookies and milk. We pair the cookies and milk with the rabbit. Now we're not scared of the rabbit anymore because we've kind of counter-conditioned that situation. Systematic desensitization was what I was looking for. That type of exposure where you're just a little bit at a time. We look at it, we realize we're not in any danger, and then we can calm ourselves down. So here, this individual, she's experiencing a tarantula, working on overcoming that fear of spiders. Operant conditioning, we have a reward or punishment paired with it, and that's going to help us to not be so fearful of what we're experiencing, or to overcome whatever the issue is, rather than just being scared of something. It's really helpful for children with autism. It teaches them what to expect. They need a little bit of help interacting with society, and so they can learn. For instance, when someone kind of gives a joke, they can understand what a punchline sounds like, and then like, oh, this is when I'm supposed to laugh, and they'll learn to laugh there. They can get reinforced with stickers, candy, so whatever's going to motivate these children. And then a punishment where we remove them from whatever it is because we didn't get a desirable outcome. So if you hit a friend, then we're going to put you in timeout or remove you from it, and we don't like to be separated, so we won't hit again. You're able to use these applied behavior analysis to condition people to overcome that mental illness. And token economy is kind of that same thing. You get rewarded for the desired behaviors. You have cognitive therapy, which was designed by Beck. Beck really believed that how you think determines how you feel and act. And so we stop thinking about those things that are causing distress, and we start thinking about things that cause peace and harmony, and that can help us to overcome that anxiety or whatever mental disorder that we're struggling with. We learn to not think in such absolutes, that black and white, that we're not either perfect or a failure, that maybe we're just human and we do some good things and we make some mistakes. So just helping you to think better and not so focused on that negative, and really focusing more on the healthier things, that are just realizing that, you know, you're okay and you don't have to do something the right way all the time. I do encourage you to come back and look at these different methods. They'll help you kind of get a better idea of some of these other just hands-on of application for it. So therapists with behavioral therapy are really relying on that conditioning and observational learning so that they can get rid of those self-defeating behaviors and learn healthy behaviors there. And it's because of the measurable behavior, the measurable results that we have, that it falls underneath this behavioral therapy. Cognitive therapy looks at how you interpret your events and the emotions, and then that's what's causing maybe the depression. And if we can think differently, change that internal belief, then we won't experience it. So if we fail a test, we feel worthless, that's an internal belief, we're depressed. If we fail the test and we believe I'm smart, but I just obviously didn't study or I didn't do well, then that's going to lead to no depression. So they're telling you to change how you think rather than always thinking these negative things about you. Maybe you just didn't study well. Maybe the instructor put the wrong test in, or maybe you just didn't have a good day. It doesn't mean you're not intelligent. It just means you need to work a little harder next time. So rational emotive therapy would be by Albert Ellis. And he's the one who kind of wants us to get out of that stinking thinking. That he says that we have this activating event and this belief about that event, and that causes the consequence of the event. And so if we can control the belief, so the action is still going to happen, but the consequence will be different based on our belief over it. So that's, again, cognitive behavioral therapy. It works to change cognitive distortions, that misinterpretation, the incorrect thinking, and those self-defeating behaviors, which he calls stinking thinking. So he's trying to